Welcome back to Passions Over Pancakes. My name is Hannah. I am your host, and today I am coming to you from the future of this interview. I just wanted to hop on here real quick and say a few things before Maya introduces herself. Maya and I had never met before this Zoom call, so what you are seeing in this 45-minute interview is a genuine connection and a genuine friendship growing. This was honestly one of the easiest interviews that I've had to edit just because of how raw and real and genuine the conversation was. With this interview, we are going to delve into what it's like to be a solo female traveler, how to travel on a budget, especially for us students, and a lot of experiences that Maya has had that are encouraging to me, and I definitely learned a lot. So, Maya, thank you so much for joining me, and why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit.
So hi, my name is Maya Banitt. I am 23 years old from Portland, Oregon. I just graduated last year with a major in theater arts administration and minor in Spanish from Fordham University Lincoln Center in New York City. I have a very huge passion for travel as well as photography and videography, and am looking to pursue a career in the movie business.
Hi Maya, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited about this interview. I know I said that before we recorded, but I'm just so pumped. As all of you heard in the introduction, Maya is very passionate about travel as well as photography and videography, which are things that I'm really interested in as well, but talking to somebody who has much more experience than me is very exciting to me. So, Maya, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about what got you into travel, as well as a little bit about what got you into photography and videography as well.
Sure. So I've loved traveling pretty much as long as I can remember. I grew up in a family that also really loved to travel. So from a very young age, we were taking trips together, whether they were camping trips or RV trips or trips abroad or trips across the country, like all of the above. We've kind of done a little bit of everything. And we've always had such a good time together that I loved it. And I want to keep pursuing that as I get older. As soon as I went to college, I thought about ways I could travel more. And so I studied abroad in Spain for my Spanish minor. And I also, choir is another passion of mine, but we'll keep it to a few passions in this interview. But through choir, I got to travel abroad to Puerto Rico and also to California and where else? And New Orleans and Texas. And so we got to go to a few different places through choir. I guess Puerto Rico is not technically abroad because it's in the US, but it's abroad across the ocean. And then for photography and videography I've been doing for many years since I was little, but I've gone more serious into it recently. And then similar with videography, I started making YouTube videos. I just started a YouTube channel called Maya Films. And those films are mostly based on my travel experiences. And so when I graduated college last May, the first thing I did was move to Korea for 5 months. And then I lived in Korea interning and traveling throughout the country, which was amazing. If you can go to Korea ever, I would highly recommend it, but go in the fall because that is when the weather's the best. And so I made a video while I was actually made 2 videos of when I was in Korea. And so those were kind of like my first videos for the channel. And then I went to Hawaii with my mom over New Year's and made a video about that. And then made a more artsy film that about Cannon Beach, which is a beach near Portland, Oregon, because Portland's 90 minutes from the Oregon coast, and Cannon Beach is one of the really beautiful coastal towns out there that I just love. And so I made a video about that. And then I started my photography Instagram a little while ago. I can't remember when, but I think it was at least a year ago, and have been posting photos from my life on there. And just recently I've been focusing on the Italy trip I took with my family in 2012. And so I have literally thousands of photos. I'll be updating that for the rest of my life. But, so yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, doing photography, videography, waiting to travel more, and then possibly going into the movie business one way or another. Yeah.
I love it. Okay, I have a question that I just want to get out of the way because it's the cheesiest question and the most obvious question I'm going to ask. But if you had to choose your top 3 places that you have ever been, where would they be and why? And also, if you had to choose the top 3 places that you haven't been yet, but you want to go to, what would they be and why?
That is so hard to choose. Top 3. Okay. I've been to so many places, but I'll have to start with Korea because that's the place that I've lived abroad the longest. So I don't know, I had more time there to really embrace the culture and make friends and see multiple places, because oftentimes when we've traveled, it's been like a certain city for like a week or certain things. It was very structured, but in Korea, Korea's also a very small country. I didn't realize this. I don't think a lot of people realize this, but I don't know if you have like an idea of how big Oregon is, but Korea is actually a third the size of Oregon, like the entire country of South Korea.
Really?
Yeah, it's small. Like geographically, it's small. So it's really convenient to take their high-speed trains, like from Seoul down to the southern tip, where Busan is, which is like the second largest city. That I don't remember the exact length, but it was like no longer than 3 hours on that train to get to like the bottom of the country.
That's crazy.
I know. So yeah, so I took full advantage of like their trains and bus systems to get around the country and see as much as I could. Like went to the coasts or the eastern coast, and also Seoul's pretty close to the western coast. So I went out to near Incheon, which is where the airport is, and went to a little beach there. But I just like made so many great memories. The food, the history, the people, like I could go on and on about how much I love my time there. I can't wait to go back, and I made many really great friends there, and I'm still in touch with several of them. So it was just a really rewarding experience overall. Okay, so that's one. 2 more. For the second one, I'll say Puerto Rico. I loved Puerto Rico. I've been fortunate enough to have gone twice. The first time was with the Fordham University Choir, and then the second time was with one of my best friends, Ariana. Her family she has a lot of family from Puerto Rico. She herself is half Mexican, half Puerto Rican, and so they were kind enough to invite me on a trip to Puerto Rico with them. So I got to go with her sister, her mom, her dad to Puerto Rico, and I got to meet some of her family who lives on the islands. And then Puerto Rico itself is an island, but it has 2 smaller islands off the shore that are attached to it. One is called Vieques, and we took a little plane over to that island and stayed there and got to like travel around that area. So that was beautiful. Again, the food, like the nature, the people, so kind, so welcoming, like both on the choir trip and with the trip with Ariana. Really, really loved it. And I wish people like would go there more. I feel like like if you want a tropical destination, Hawaii is a very popular choice, which is understandable. I love Hawaii, but Puerto Rico has like a lot of similar things. Like they have beaches and amazing food and like a very tropical climate. They have a rainforest there, which is incredible. So I really highly recommend checking out Puerto Rico if you want that kind of that vacation as well. And then 3, oh geez.
No pressure. Good luck.
Where do I want to talk about? I could talk about everywhere I've been. I guess I'll talk about Spain, since that's, again, one of the more recent places I've been. So Spain is where I studied abroad for a month through Fordham the summer of, I believe it was 2017, for my Spanish major. And I was located in Granada, which is in the very southern part of the country. It's a very small city, but it's gorgeous. It's famous for the Alhambra Palace, which is this huge old palace that sits on top of a hill above the city. And Granada is really close to the coast, the southern coast of Spain. And so me and maybe like 9 or 10 other people from the group, we took a little trip down to Almuñécar, which is the beach, which is one of the beaches close to Granada, and we stayed there for a weekend, which was so pretty. Oh my gosh. And I had never been inside or touched like the Mediterranean Sea before. And so when I swam in it, I was really surprised because I could actually float, because the salt content is higher than all of the other oceans that I've swum in. So I was like, I can float. This is amazing, because I normally just like sink whenever I go try to float in a body of water. So that was fun. And then I also got to travel to Sevilla and Cordoba, which are other cities in Spain, on like weekend trips. And then after the program ended, I took the bus with my friend Devin up to Madrid and just stayed there for a couple nights before flying home to Portland. So, and it was really cool to be able to use my Spanish there because I'd been studying Spanish since 7th grade. And I had gone to Costa Rica in 8th grade and then Puerto Rico and had been able to use my Spanish there. But then living in Spain for a full month, I really pushed myself to try and use it. I was still a little nerve-wracking because like I can speak it and read it better than listening and understanding because native speakers speak very quickly, and I'm always like, I heard like some words, but like the full context I didn't quite get. But I still like tried to seek discomfort, and I took a yoga class in Spanish, which was challenging, but I knew yoga well enough to be able to do the moves, and I was like following along with people.
That's fair.
So yeah, I loved it. Beautiful country, beautiful experience. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question for you real quick, and then I want to hear about the 3 places that you do want to go.
Yeah.
So before this interview started, you said that you didn't know Korean very well. You still don't really know Korean very well, can't hold a conversation very well, anything like that. It was very similar with me. I know a little bit of Hebrew, enough to barely hold a conversation in Israel, but not enough to speak with people who spoke Arabic or anything like that. Would you, like for people who are listening who are really wanting to get into travel and wanting to go to places that are so outside of their comfort zone and they don't know the language, they don't know anybody there, maybe they want to go alone, do you think that you need to know the language in order to go somewhere that's so out of your comfort zone? Obviously maybe for safety, maybe a couple of phrases just for safety, but overall, do you think that you need to have a strong basis of the language in order to visit there for a week or a month? And I don't know. That's something that I've always wondered. Do you think that that's important, or can you get by?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it really depends on where you're going. So for Korea, they are very well versed in English for the most part, at least in the metropolitan areas. So like Seoul, you can go there with very, very minimal to no Korean and you'll be okay. Like the buses, they have their announcements in Korean and they'll have them in English, and a lot of the signage is in English. And if you're staying in a hotel or an Airbnb, like most places, like they can accommodate their tourism from English speaking countries is very prominent there. So they're very used to being able to communicate with people who don't know Korean. But when I was staying there, I was staying in Ilsan, which is like an hour outside of Seoul by train in a more suburban area. And there were definitely way less foreigners and people knew English less. And so that was really interesting. So I felt like it was good that I had prepped myself a little bit with the language to have that confidence to be able to order food or ask for where the bathroom was, or like saying yes or no, or like certain phrases like that. And I would recommend kind of no matter where you go, even if it's Italy or somewhere, other places in Europe where literally everyone speaks English, like even just learning those basic phrases of like how to say yes and no, I'm sorry, thank you, where's the bathroom, always important, and just like common phrases like that. And even if the people working with you are fully fluent in English, they do appreciate the effort if you try to speak to them in their native tongue. So yeah, I would recommend trying to always learn a little bit wherever you go. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, and I think both of us would probably say that I noticed a lot when I tried to, in my very American accent, try to speak Hebrew when I was in Israel. Everybody did appreciate it. They're like, this girl who knows nothing about this is at least attempting, and we can kind of understand what she's saying. If we really, really don't understand her, we can speak in English. But yeah, it's really, I mean, it's a learning experience for the person who's trying to speak, and it's also a really cool experience for the person who that is their native tongue, because somebody's trying something new and hopefully they appreciate that. I appreciate it when people who aren't from the US speak English or try to speak English. I love that. I think that's awesome. Learn something new, you know?
Definitely. And I had some, like similar in Korea, people were very appreciative whenever I spoke to them in Korean. They were also very surprised because a lot of tourists go there knowing zero Korean. And then so when I would speak it, they'd be like, oh my gosh, you know Korean. I'm like, I really have just said this one phrase like 10 times. So I sound really loud. It sounds like I speak Korean.
That's awesome. Try to fool them a little bit. That's awesome. I love it. Okay, real quick, I do want to hear about the 3 places that you really want to go.
Okay, these are a little bit easier. The number 1 is Greece, because I've had a dream to go to Greece for years. Like in 7th grade teacher's class, my teacher had us all plan a trip, like a month-long trip to a country where we had to research an international school to go to. We had to plan the itinerary of every like place we stayed, every activity we did, down to like the food we ate. And I chose Greece. And so I still have that trip saved. And being my 7th grade self, I did not do it on any kind of a reasonable budget. So like the trip I went was like way out there. So I could never actually do it on that budget. But hopefully I can still go to Greece someday and maybe do like 1 or 2 of the things I put on there, and then do other things in my budget and see the country, because I'm just really fascinated, especially by Santorini, like those white houses up on that island. I had a couple friends go a few months ago and I saw their photos and I was like, oh, I want to go so bad. But yeah, I don't really know what first inspired me to go to or want to go to Greece. It's just kind of, I saw it one day online or heard about it in class, and I was like, okay, that place, I want to go there. And then in addition to Greece, I literally, I mean, I'm the kind of person who would go anywhere and kind of want to go. If I could go to every country in the world, I would. But I guess 2 other places that are higher up on the list would be Australia. Really want to go to Australia. I feel so bad about all the fires that were going on over there. I haven't heard an update recently, but I hope that things are starting to improve over there.
Yeah.
I think I did hear the fires are out for the most part.
I think I heard that as well. Yeah. If anybody from Australia is watching right now, I know there are a couple of people that have reached out to me that are from Australia. Please give us an update, because I've been thinking about y'all a lot the whole year. It's been a hot minute since I have had an update, but I don't know if it's just because the American news stations aren't really saying anything about it now or what, but
everything now. But I still want to make sure that Australia is doing okay and that they're not.
Absolutely.
And then also, in addition to Australia and Greece, I would have to say Iceland. I mean, I'm going to put in a 4th and say New Zealand too, because I can't limit it. New Zealand, I'd say, because I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan, and Lord of the Rings was filmed in New Zealand. So I really want to go to New Zealand and like do the Lord of the Rings tour, go to the Shire or Hobbiton and do that whole thing, do like the big horseback riding tour. All of that.
Oh my gosh. I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, it's a thing. It's a big draw for tourists to New Zealand. It's like the Lord of the Rings.
Wow. Yeah. That's interesting. I had
no idea. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then Iceland, big draws for Iceland are the little cute Icelandic ponies. I want to ride them.
I don't blame you at all.
And then like the hot springs, and also it's kind of a photographer's and videographer's paradise. Like the landscape is otherworldly from what I've seen.
For sure. I've only seen pictures and videos and all that, but I would agree. It's absolutely gorgeous there. And for those listening who may not have checked out her Instagram yet, we are both equestrians. So the Icelandic ponies are a big draw for, I think, both of us.
Yes, I really would love to ride those. And then also, I think you can see the Northern Lights in Iceland, right?
I think so. I think so. My mom has been talking about going there for years and years because she wants to see the Northern Lights. So I'm pretty sure. Other than
That's
that,
a bucket list item for me as well, to see the Northern Lights. So
100%, 100%. I love it. Would you ever consider, if it was a possibility, and maybe with going into filmmaking and directing and that side of the theater world, maybe this is possible, but would you ever consider making travel while taking photos and videos a career at any point?
Honestly, yeah, if I could make that work, I would love to do that. Kind of a dream for me would be able to direct movies that had a high enough budget that they could film on location abroad. Because, I mean, that's very expensive to do, and only very specific studios can afford that. But that just seems like the dream to me, because then you get to travel to another culture, another country, and then make a piece of art in that place with your vision and with a whole crew of amazing, talented people. And together as a community, you produce something in another place, and then you share it with the world. Like that's what I want to do. And so like I don't know how I'm gonna get there yet, but I would love to do that. And whether it's through Hollywood or like an independent company or me by myself, like I don't know how it's gonna manifest yet, but that's kind of my vision for what I want in the future.
That's really cool. I mean, if you had the opportunity to do something like that, to do something that you're so passionate about, two things that you're really passionate about, videography and or photography and traveling and being able to experience the culture while you're at it, I mean, why not? That's amazing. I love that. That's fantastic. So while you've been traveling, you said you did a couple things abroad. You studied in Spain abroad and going to Korea, all of that, and a couple things with your school. What's your advice on planning a trip on a budget and doing things on a budget with maybe not a whole ton of resources?
Yeah, so budget's really important when you want to travel, obviously, but I think like even planning it down even more than you might think is really a good skill to have. Like put it like make a list, like a note list, and say like, okay, I'm going to save this much for food, and then this much for lodging, and this much for extra experiences, this much for etc. And really just kind of break it down and then stick to it, because I think when you get to a new place, the excitement of being in a new place, it can be very easy to want to be like, okay, I'm going to buy this, I'm going to buy this, I'm going to go there. But before you go, if you have that like pretty strict budget of being like, okay, this is what I can reasonably afford to do, and then stick to that, and then try to make the most out of the experiences that you can. Even try to look for experiences that don't cost anything. There's a lot of things you can do that are 100% free. And like since I love nature so much, I spent a lot of my time in Korea hiking or just like going to Buddhist temples and just observing culture on foot instead of paying for like a big tour package or something. If you seek them out and do your own research, there's a lot you can do on your own just for free and on your own time. So I would recommend like trying to look into the off the beaten path type of things rather than what the tourism agencies are trying to throw at you, because those will often be very expensive and probably overpriced. So yeah, just really save up and plan it out, and then when you go, don't be afraid to do things that maybe you haven't heard of other people doing. Really follow what you're interested in and then go for it.
Okay, I love that. What is your advice? This is the first time I'm meeting you, so I'm not sure if like you're an extrovert, if you're an introvert, if you're somewhere in between. But for people who really anywhere on that social spectrum, what is your advice for reaching out to locals and making friends with locals, maybe even just striking up a conversation with locals? If they do or don't speak the language, what's your advice for just getting to know the culture on a basis of just talking to the locals?
Yeah, so I am an extrovert, so I don't know how it would be for someone who is more introverted, but for me, I really enjoy going up and meeting people on the street, even if I've never met them before, or even if they don't speak the language that well. And I'm going to tell a story from when I was in Korea, actually, that relates to this. So I took the train from Seoul to Sokcho, which is on the eastern coast. And Sokcho is a tiny little coastal town, but it's right near this amazing national park called Seoraksan, which is these huge mountains and forests that a lot of Koreans will travel to do photography and to hike. And so when one of the YouTubers I had been watching before and during and after I left Korea, her name's Pancakes, and one of the videos she did was going to Sokcho, and I watched a lot of her videos to get inspiration of places to go and things to see while I was there, and she did this really great vlog to Sokcho. So I went, and when I was researching Sokcho, I found out about this national park, and since I love hiking, I'm like, okay, that's what I'm gonna do. So I took this little bus from the train station to the trailhead and then started hiking and I did almost everything in Korea by myself. But there were tons of hikers there, all Korean. I think maybe I saw a few other foreigners, but it was mostly all Korean hikers. And I think I was on the trail like only a little bit way up, and I was taking a photo of the river, because there's a river that like would flow down the mountain, and this really nice man who barely spoke English offered to take my photo. I think he just kind of like was pointing at it and was like, "You want me to take your photo?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, thank you." And so he did, and then we just kind of started talking, me and my limited Korean and him and his limited English. And we actually like had a fairly long conversation that way through our broken languages, and I hiked with him for a fair distance, and he introduced me to his friend, and it turned out he was part of this huge hiking group of like 20 people. So like people had from his group had already gone up and then started coming down, and so as everyone was coming down, he kept like introducing me to his friends. Because
awesome.
I know, so the word for friend in Korean is 친구. So he kept saying like, "This is my 친구 Maya."
Oh my god!
And we were going down to the mountain. And I was like, oh, this is so sweet. And so I was like walking with him and his friend, and then I was taking pictures on my camera, and then he would take pictures of me since I was alone. And then we came back down, and then his whole group had started eating lunch right by the river together, and he was like, come eat with us. And so I came and sat down, and we all shared lunch together. Like the Koreans were like all asking me questions, and they're offering their food with me, like kimbap and really, really delicious Korean food. And then I had the small amount of food I packed, and I was offering it to them too. And they were just like so friendly and welcoming, and they kept again saying how impressed they were with my Korean, which was like almost nothing. But since I was like making an effort and I knew something pretty well, how to say something pretty clearly, they were like, "Oh, you're very accomplished in Korean." I'm like, "Oh, 감사합니다," which is thank you in Korean. And then we all took like a big group photo and then walked down together. And I don't know, if I had been more shy or more reserved and had refused that initial photo that he had offered, I would have missed out on this whole huge experience of getting to hike with him and then share lunch with these amazing people. And I think it's definitely important to use your discretion on strangers, obviously, and like who you interact with, especially when you're alone, especially if you're female. But I got a very friendly vibe from him, and there were a lot of people hiking on that trail. It wasn't like we were alone. And so I felt okay with like walking with him and getting to know him. And he wasn't creepy at all either. Like some older men can be like, oh, I want to, like they have other agendas, but he was like a sweet uncle who was just like wanting to keep me company and like, yeah, and talk to me. So it was really, really nice and a really sweet experience.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Yeah, I definitely think it's obviously important to use your discretion anywhere that you're at, but especially, I mean, like you said, as a young woman alone. Did you go completely alone to Korea?
I did. Yeah.
You did. Okay. Wow, that's amazing. Do you, especially as a woman solo traveler, I think that's something that a lot of people are really afraid to do. I know I definitely have my reservations about that. But it's something that I absolutely want to do one day, just because I think that, I mean, like you said, if you use your discretion, if you're very aware of what's going on, aware of your surroundings, the worst, I mean, what could go right is so much more important than what could go wrong, in my opinion. And maybe that's the wrong way to think about it, I'm not sure. But as a female solo traveler for probably more trips than just Korea, I'm assuming, right?
Korea was the first trip that I did completely solo. I mean, Spain was semi-solo because I was with a school group, but I did some of my own solo stuff within that, like going to Madrid or whatever. But Korea was the first, like, I flew there alone, I lived there alone, etc.
For sure. What are some of the biggest pros and the biggest cons to both traveling with a group and then also traveling on your own?
That's another really great question. I'll start with pros and cons of traveling alone first. So traveling alone, pros I'd say are freedom. Like you get to make 100% of your itinerary. Everything you do gets to be things that you want to do, and you get to do it on your own time and schedule. So that was really great. Like I had a lot of free time with my internship, so I could, if I wanted to go, literally like one night I was like, I want to go on a trip tomorrow with like 2 hours of planning before bed. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna pack and then I'm gonna go tomorrow. And then I just did. Like I didn't have to like prep for a week or anything before going. I got to be very spontaneous. So spontaneity is a big pro of traveling alone. I'd say a con is that it can get a little lonely, like even being an extrovert and making friends there and interacting with people every day. At the end of the day, you go home to your Airbnb or your hostel or wherever you're staying, and you're by yourself every night. And some nights I was okay with that, of like reminiscing about my day or watching Netflix or whatever. And then some nights I was like, oh, I miss my family. I miss my friends. I wish they could be here with me, sharing these experiences with me. And I posted a lot of photos on Facebook and videos and stuff to try and include them virtually as much as I could. So I felt like they were kind of going along with me.
For sure.
But yeah, that's definitely something I felt was loneliness and wishing I could share it with the people I love. And then so for group pro is you get to have shared experiences with your friends or with a friend or family members or maybe with a stranger. If you go like with a tour group, you may not know those people, but you're going to be experiencing things together. And so you get to share it with someone. Con is it's structured. So you can't just like run off and do something or go to this place. If you really, really want to, you have to stay with the itinerary, stay with the group. But sometimes that can be great too, because groups may take you to places that you didn't even know about or didn't think you would like, but then you ended up loving, and it pushes you out of your comfort zone. So that's a pro too, of like that unknowing and just relaxing and going with the flow of something that's more structured.
For sure, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. So I definitely see where you're coming from with both of those pros and cons, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I have 2 more questions just to wrap everything up. The first one being, what advice would you have for somebody our age or maybe a little bit younger, any college kids, high school kids, maybe just postgraduate college kids that are wanting to travel? Maybe their friends or family don't really support it. Maybe they do. Either way, they just want to travel. What is your biggest advice for anything from planning to actually being there and getting the most out of the trip? What would be your biggest advice?
I'd say that if you really want to travel and have those experiences, there's always a way that you can make it work. Even if people are like telling me like, no, you can't afford it, or no, it's not worth it, or you shouldn't do that. Like if you really want to do it, you can do it. And I would strongly advise that you do find a way to make it work. And one of the biggest ways that people can travel, and if parents are less supportive of it, a good way to convince them is through study abroad. So if your school offers that, I highly recommend taking advantage of it. And it's fully structured, usually through the school, so it's safe. And it can often be included in tuition too. So not every program is like hugely more expensive. It can be already rolled into like the semester, the price of the semester. So that's a really great way to start on the travel experience. And then if you want to go solo or after school or before college, if you haven't gone to college yet, I would look into Asia internship program. You do have to pay to go on the internship experience in another country, but I did a lot of research into programs that go abroad for internships, and most of them were like crazy expensive, like tens of thousands of dollars. And I'm like, okay, no, there's no way. But I know they look like incredible experiences, but they're just so expensive.
For sure.
Asia internship program, you don't have to go for like a set amount of time. They do it in like 2-month, 3-month, 4-month, 5-month, I think 6-month chunks. And the longer you go, the more expensive it is. But they were the lowest option in terms of price that I found on the internet. And I went only for, I think, 4 months. I think I did 4 months. And so I would look into that. And they do offer scholarship also. So there's ways to bring that price down. So advice would just be to really just like push yourself, seek that discomfort, go for it. If you want to make it work, you will find a way. And usually things turn out to be way better than you even expected when it comes to traveling, because you have like an idea of how it's going to go, and then you get there and then it's like life changing. Like every trip I've gone on, even small ones, they really impacted me as a person. And I really took away a lot from all of them. So yeah, I just can't say enough about how much travel can mean to someone's life and how it can shape you as a person and shape your career as well.
For sure. I love that. When you started to travel, whether it was with the school that you went to or just on your own? I know you said that at the beginning your family has just taken a lot of trips in general, even before you did study abroad.
Yeah.
Was your family in support of that completely, or were there some drawbacks that they had, and how did they react to that?
For study abroad, or
Yeah, for study abroad, and then also past study abroad, when like Korea, just any internships and anywhere that you went without them, I guess.
they were fully supportive. Luckily, they really saw the value in travel and the experiences that I was going to have. They knew would be very beneficial, and so yeah, they didn't fight me on it at all. They were 100% supportive, and it was great for the Spain trip. I have a friend who lives in Portugal, and Portugal's right next to Spain, and so I actually got to go visit my friend in Portugal right before going to Spain, which they loved because I hadn't seen her in a while. And so I got to see her and then go over to Spain and have my month there. And in Korea was definitely a little bit more nerve-wracking for them just because it was a longer experience and I was going completely alone to a country. I had never been, a big reason I went to Korea was I love the culture and I wanted to experience it, but also I'd never been to Asia. And so because I had never been to Asia or Korea specifically, they were like, okay, this is a big step, but we know you're confident and we trust you that you're going to be safe and it's going to be fine. You've done a lot of travel. And there were some really hard moments for me, but I was able to get through it and they were very supportive. And luckily we have FaceTime, so I could FaceTime them in Korea, which was funny because Korea's, depending on what time of the year it is, it's either 16 or 17 hours ahead, which would be like a day ahead. So I would call them from the future, which
oh my gosh.
yeah, from Oregon, that's like the time change. So
wow.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I feel very fortunate that I have a family who's so supportive of traveling. Yeah.
For sure. That's amazing. I love that. Okay, and the last question. Is there anything that you wanted to say, anything that we haven't covered, whether it's about travel, photography, videography, theater, anything like that, that we may not have gotten to that you wanted to say or just kind of get out there before we wrap it up?
Oh boy, I don't know. I mean, I feel like we covered a lot.
We did.
I could go on about, maybe I'll just like try and list the places that I've traveled.
Yeah,
So,
do it.
Okay, let's see. Let's start with the countries. So countries are obviously America, Canada. I've been to Vancouver, BC, Montreal, and then just the Yukon because my mom, I have a twin sister. I don't know if I mentioned that yet during the recording, but when we were 9, my mom took my sister and I on an RV trip by herself from Oregon up to Alaska, and through the Yukon forest of Canada all the way up to Alaska. And my dad's a doctor, and so he could only get 4 weeks off that summer, and so he flew up to Anchorage, met us in Alaska. Then we had 2 weeks RVing around Alaska, and then 2 weeks coming home as a family. And people thought like my mom was crazy, like for driving 2 9-year-old girls up to Alaska by herself. Like she was I think I get a lot of my adventurous spirit from her too. And so that was just an amazing experience. And I'm so bummed because I hadn't really started getting into photography yet. I think I was around 9, and so I don't have photos that I took from that trip, but my dad has photos on the computer somewhere. I'll have to dig them up at some point, but I would love to go back to Alaska. And now that I'm fully into photography, because we saw so many bears, we saw grizzly bear triplets along the side of the highway.
What?
I know. I didn't even know bears. I guess bears have triplets. I've heard of them having twins, but triplets, wow. And then I think we saw moose triplets too, or at least moose twins. Like, yeah.
Gosh. That's crazy.
I know, that's a lot for the mother moose to give birth
Truly.
to the bear too. But yeah, that was amazing. So okay, yeah, back to the countries. So Latin America, Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, Europe, Italy, Netherlands, Germany, Spain, Denmark, Sweden, Ireland, England. I actually have a list, so let me pull that up so I can.
I love it. I love it. Yes.
It's really hard to remember sometimes. Okay.
Well, when you've been to that many places, yeah, I would imagine that it's hard to kind of think through them and list them off.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go. USA, Canada, England, Ireland, Germany, Costa Rica, Italy, Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, Portugal, Spain, Korea. Yeah, those are the countries. And Puerto Rico is technically part of the US, but it's really its own separate culture and place. So I count that too. And then for states, I haven't been to all the states yet. I've been to most of them. I think I've been to like 38 or something like that. So goal is to, and a lot of those are through like the RV trips we did as a family, even if it was just like driving through it. But I still count that. So
for sure, it counts.
I'd love to check all 50 off at some point, and then it's a little unlikely I'll get to every country in this lifetime, but if it can happen, I would love to do that too.
For sure. Oh my gosh, that would be so cool. Absolutely.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Hopefully I can continue traveling and continue. I know I'll continue my photography no matter what, but then hopefully I can do travel videography as well, and then explore narrative filmmaking too, and maybe combining those one day by filming on location for the stories that I'm sharing. Yeah,
for sure. I love that. And you said that, I can't remember, I know we've talked to you Instagram DMs, but did you say that you had been to Utah?
I have, yes.
Okay.
We RV'd through Salt Lake City and
that's right.
Utah wilderness. This is a really funny story. So we were driving along the Salt Flat, and there was a rest stop on the Salt Flat, and there was like this small wooden pen for dogs to like relieve themselves, but it was literally like such old pieces of wood that the dogs, like, it would not contain dogs at all. It was like this really old fence that had so many gaps, and it was in the middle of this huge salt flat, and it was like, this is the dog area. When there's like dogs for miles, I'm like, really?
Amazing. Oh my gosh, that's fantastic.
Like, this specific square right here. That's
right in the middle of all of this. Oh, that's really funny. I love it. Well, if you ever come back to Utah, you definitely have a place to stay. And if I do say so myself, we have some pretty cool scenery here for you to take some videos and pictures of. So you definitely have a place to stay if you ever come back through.
I would love to come back. Also, I have a cousin who goes to, I think, the University of Salt Lake.
Awesome. Then you have more than one excuse. University of Utah, maybe?
Maybe that's probably it. The one that in Salt Lake City.
Yes. Yep. University of Utah. Yeah. Well, then you have an excuse to come.
And I would love to come visit you and see you in person. And same invitation goes to you back in Portland, Oregon, if you ever want to come out here. Yeah.
Thanks. I love it. Awesome. Okay. Well, Maya, it has been an absolute wonderful, wonderful time talking with you and getting to know you before and after the recording. And I guess maybe after in the future. I already know that it's going to be wonderful. We haven't stopped recording yet, but you genuinely are an inspiration to me, and anybody who's watching or listening or reading, please take this video or whatever you're reading right now as some type of inspiration to get out and do something that you're uncomfortable with, whether it's solo travel, whether it's skydiving, whether it's doing something that it's so out of your comfort zone, like a solo travel. Do it, because you're going to come out the other side with so many amazing experiences. And Maya, just talking to you is really inspiring and encouraging, because somebody who is the same age as I am is doing something so incredible with your passion, with your major, and then turning that into so many other things with travel, with videography, with photography. And I'm really inspired by you. And so I'm really, really, really glad that you reached out through Instagram DMs. I'm really glad that we found each other. I'm glad that we're friends now, if I do say so myself. And I'm just so happy to have talked to you and had the pleasure of recording this and putting it online where more people can be inspired by you. So
thank you. It was so nice to talk to you too. Thank you for starting Passions Over Pancakes and for giving this platform for people to just talk about what they love. I think that's really awesome. And I want to give a little shout out to Yes Theory, because they are the people who connected me with Hannah and Passions Over Pancakes. I saw Hannah on their Instagram story where they were highlighting her and her talking about this new project she was starting. And I first saw Yes Theory when I was in Korea. One of their videos just popped up on my YouTube as like a recommended video, and I watched it and I was hooked. And then for like the rest of my time in Korea and then going forward now, I'm going to really embrace their seek discomfort motto and go forward and travel, embrace life, and just kind of live everything to the fullest in the best way that I can. So
For sure, for sure. What an incredibly appropriate place to find a Yes Theory and Seek Discomfort video.
I know.
In the middle of a solo travel in Korea. That's awesome.
Very appropriate.
Yeah, awesome. And I agree 100%. Thank you, Yes Theory, and the Yes fam for bringing this whole thing together. And this is a dream come true for me, being able to talk to people that I am not connected with on a regular basis. And this is just crazy encouraging and crazy exciting to me. So
for me too, especially since we're in quarantine right now and the world's kind of still slowly starting to resume things, but it's mostly on a standstill still. Like a lot of my friends don't live here, and so I get FaceTime with them, but I don't get to see them a lot. And so this is a great way to make a new friend virtually, even though we're not in the same city. And hopefully we'll get to meet in person one day. But
absolutely, absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Maya. Everybody, all of the links, everything that we had talked about is going to be in the description below and at the end of the article if you are reading this. So make sure to check out her Instagram, her personal and photography Instagram, her YouTube channel, and anything else that is linked below. Make sure that you Yes Fam people go support more people that are in the Yes Fam, and we will see you next week.